The supervision of all preparations was in the hands of von Rundstedt, Commander-in-Chief Westlich. On the right, the 5th Panzer Army under General of the Panzer Force von Manteuffel, and the 7th Army at the left wing under General Brandenberger for coverage in the south. While the operation was being prepared, it was important above all to keep this a secret from the Allied forces. All movements were made during the night only. All vehicles in the front vicinity were wrapped in straw to keep the noise to a minimum. But nobody could...
During the first night of the battle at the Bulge, the enemy infiltrated between our lines
and guns of the offensive aroused the commanding officer of the 112th Regiment, Colonel Guston Nelson.
I started to get reports from my various companies, each one of which was attached to each of the 3 infantry regiments of the 106th Infantry Division.
Our troops there were isolated. 3rd Army was ordered to the rescue, to break the German iron ring and salient into the Allied lines, widened it, blew it out to a bulge, engulfed Bastogne. They surrounded.
But the cameraman got too far forward, and his film fell into our hands. Tanks and infantry of the Wehrmacht passed through the forward positions held by the American 1st Army. Their advanced dumps have been destroyed or captured. And the Hun makes the best of his chance with American cigarettes. There's no point in minimizing the power behind this unexpected advance. Whether it is the last desperate effort of the wounded beast remains to be seen. But though it must undoubtedly have its effect on the length of the war, it cannot change the final result.
Attached to us, primarily the Combat Command B of the
Robert Hasbrook.
The attack began in appalling weather when the air forces were grounded. But a break in the weather gave a chance to the Allied air strength and the...
Auch das Wetter befehlen würde.
Call up headquarters and ironically inquire whether Hitler was now ordering the weather too.
Telefonischen Anfrage beim Hauptquartier.
I met the first prisoners at noon on December 18th, on my way from the northern part of the Schnee-Eifel via Bleialf to Schönberg. I must say they seemed rather confused. The questioning of young people confirmed that this was a division which apparently had been newly assembled, or at least contained a great number of men with no war experience.
Oder zumindest mit einer großen Anzahl von kriegsunerfahrenen Leuten hier in Stellung war.
The operation had been initiated according to schedule. The 7th Army, attacking from the Eifel front, gained a considerable amount of terrain. The 5th Panzer Army, advancing north of the 7th Army, had...
On emmène des Américains faits prisonniers dans les Ardennes vers les camps nazis.
Possible to evacuate civilians from the Bastogne pocket, they knew too many details of the garrison's strength. Even the troops are made to produce their papers. There's always a chance that a complete American uniform may hide a German paratrooper. By this time, Patton's convoys in an ever-growing stream passed down the corridor smashed open by his armor.
From our neighboring divisions, the 99th on our left and the 28th on our right.
7th Armored Division was to counterattack through Colonel Riggs' position to the east. General Hogue was instructed to attack to the southeast when his armor arrived. There, another regiment of the 106th was cut off. But the 7th Armored Division was headquartered some 60 miles away to the north in Holland. Command B of the 9th Armored Division was led by General William Hogue, who was preparing an attack in the north that morning when his new assignment reached him.
I then
There wasn't much time to lose. They had ripped our lines wide open at the Ardennes.
Time in December, we were going down this country road, and all of a sudden we come upon this great confusion. Jeeps, trucks, men, equipment, going the opposite way. Well, you stop to think, what are we getting ourselves into? And
on the afternoon of 21st December, General Clark informed me that the attack on St. Beth was becoming so heavy they would be forced out of that position that evening, and said he would retreat to the west. I agreed to conform with his movement.
Am 21. und 22. gelungen, sodass wir dann Saint-Vith endgültig in Besitz nehmen konnten. Aber der Zeitverlust war groß und daher die Bedeutung ihrer Verteidigung von Saint-Vith.
Sector.
Deshalb waren meine Anstrengungen bis zum 22. Dezember dahin gerichtet.
Until December 22nd, therefore, my efforts were concentrated on the coordination of the attack on Saint-Vith. In other words, the cooperation of all arms, the infantry, the storm guns.
On the morning of the 17th, word reached Saint-Vith of a German penetration coming from the east toward Colonel Riggs' position.
The division commander asked me to set up, ordered me, as a matter of fact, to set up a defense line astride the Schoenberg-Saint-Vith road, to hold that road for the promised counterattack to the 7th Armored, and as an escape route for our 2 infantry regiments to the front.
A noise coming from the woods about 2 miles east of Saint-Vith indicated German tanks were there. The only American troops between these Germans and the town of Saint-Vith was a company of the 168th Engineers of the 106th Division.
But between 1200 and 1300 on the 21st until 2300 hours or 11 o'clock that night, I saw my own immediate force, which had been in the neighborhood of 680 men, go to less than 200.
16 décembre 1944, offensive allemande en Ardennes, le nazi revient. Dans un sursaut désespéré, ses tigres, ses canons, ses avions, tout se rue sur la Belgique. Et dans le ciel contre Liège, ce sont les bombes et les robots. Les Alliés ripostent. Liège, c'est la plaque tournante des armées alliées. Neutraliser la ville est essentiel. Il faut terroriser, domestiquer, neutraliser sa population. Hitler attaque, mais il a des souvenirs cuisants ici. Il veut éviter la cité ardente, il faut donc la contourner et l'anéantir. Au creux de sa vallée, Liège aurait pu vivre heureuse, mais elle est aux portes de la Germanie. Liège, l'héroïne de 14 et de 40, sera l'héroïne de 44. Le mémorial interallié la domine, témoignage des campagnes d'hier. Des plaies s'incrustent dans ses flancs, mais la vie continue et la bataille. Les robots, les V1 grondent vers la cité ardente. Aveugle, le robot a frappé. De nouvelles ruines, de nouveaux deuils, de nouvelles souffrances, le fascisme a parlé. Civils belges et soldats américains partagent les souffrances. Ensemble, ils sont plongés dans la bataille. Le combat à visage découvert effraie l'ennemi. Il préfère le robot, la V1, le messager de la lâcheté. L'ennemi attaque.
The eastern point in the horseshoe defending Saint-Vith was now an island defending only itself. Roadblock had been the town's first defense. Still held the road under his original orders.
War in our prisoner of war enclosure, who were identified from 5 German divisions. This seemed impossible to me, but later events proved it to be correct.
The defensive horseshoe was now a good 25 miles long, reinforced by Colonel Nelson's regiment that had lost touch with its division. But the line was being pounded from a horseshoe into a fortified goose egg. Lieutenant Patton knew why. He was riding wounded on the hood of a jeep, driven by a German officer back toward a German aid station.
There were 2 things going on that road that even a lieutenant as green as I was could add up and make sense out of. First thing, of course, was the number of troops moving west along that road, infantry on either side of the road, and the other was the number of vehicles coming down.
I approached it. I saw that it was my superior, Field Marshal Model, who had the same intention as I. So we continued our efforts together and tried to separate the column, but until nightfall on the 17th, a certain confusion and perplexity remained, since we were not able to separate the vehicles.
Of course, General started. These sounded like a huge
Later that same day, we were also informed by 1st Army behind 8th Corps, to which we were attached, that the 7th Armored Division would attack through Sanvie to our east, and that we were to hold these routes, which were quite vital and a strategic road net in that area, free for this attack.
Knowing that Sanvie now was filled with German troops coming in from the east, the north, and the south, peeled off to the right until we got in the vicinity of the road that led to Prum. And there we broke off into 5- and 8-man groups. I gave them a compass bearing and told them to try to work their way to the west to rejoin General Clark, Combat Command B, where we might continue the fight. For by night, right flank to our left flank all night long, we heard the noise of trucks.
They could not counterattack. I attempted at that time to split them up into patrols so they could attempt to work their way back to the friendly lines, the U.S. lines. We started 2 of these patrols out and watched both of them captured. And shortly thereafter, I was captured with the remainder of the group.
So I instructed that the radio to all units under my command be opened up and that the orders would be given in the clear.
Have to be blown because of the pressure of the German army coming in from his flanks. And
American unit coming out of Sanvie. And my little platoon became part of the rear guard of the last unit out of Sanvie.
As we felt, we attempted to work our way through these vehicles to find out what the trouble was, and we found that there was a burning tank in Somme Chateau and that the Germans had apparently come around behind us with an anti-tank gun.
In the meanwhile, someone had discovered a side road up a sort of a side canyon that went up this high mountain beside this Somme River.
The Armored Division had left Holland before dawn, but its destination was Bastogne. There, General Hasbrouck arrived well ahead of his columns, only to learn that the trouble was somewhere else.
I proceeded and exchanged the necessary coordination for the attacks of the various battalions of the division as we received...
Colonel V.L. Boylan was in the Horseshoe's northern curve.
I can't recall touch with the 8th Corps, which I later learned had been forced to retreat from Bastogne to Neufchâteau down in France. Accordingly, I decided to send a staff officer of mine, Lieutenant Colonel Schroeder, to try and locate 1st Army headquarters and apprise them of our situation and ask for help.
The defenses east of Saint-Vith still held. There, Colonel, then Major, Don Boyer was in the point of the Horseshoe.
communicate.
It was an extremely lonesome place. It's not milling with people. You don't... Little hole. Maybe a...
For a private like Bill Dassinger, the battlefield was everywhere.
Many territory that we have.
You were constantly getting rumors. I remember one time we heard that the brightest spot on the Western Front was St. Bith. Many men believed the rumors that different units had pulled out and in turn were panicked. I remember reading one of Jim Thurber's book stories, which is entitled The Day the Dam Broke. And it seemed
2 days after Christmas, Third Army broke the German lines, curled back their flanks, made first contact with the men in Bastogne. The siege, the German Bulge, finally deflated. Third Army turned its fighting strength against the Siegfried Line in the Rhine River. The Germans had no place to go now but home.
La campagne d'hiver exigeait son lourd tribut. Chaque jour, il y eut des morts à éviter. L'ennemi s'était enterré et se défendait farouchement. L'aviation intervenait à chaque occasion favorable.
Accompli leur terrible mission, ils n'avaient plus qu'à rentrer.
Keeping our planes on the ground. But at last their chance came, and both Bomber Command and the 2nd Tactical Air Force threw their weight into the battle in support of the ground forces. Bombers hit and...
qui avait été cloué au sol par le brouillard, put enfin reprendre ses missions. Le 24 décembre, semblable à un cadeau de Noël.
Meanwhile, General Patton's tanks and infantry fought to widen the supply corridor they'd driven in order to relieve the heroic 101st Airborne Division at Bastogne under siege for almost a week. These are men of the 4th Armored Division. Although they met tough opposition, they found some Germans glad enough to surrender, in spite of their diet of pep talks from the German High Command. From the air, the fighting garrison of Bastogne received help on a large scale. Transport planes, heavily laden with parachute packs, dropped ton after ton of urgently needed ammunition and food. The American positions were overrun, and the Germans pushed a great bulge into the Allied lines in Belgium. Of the German advance, we have secured a remarkable film.
Comanster would be the last defense. From there, General Clark immediately sought an escape route to the west, a dirt road through the woods to Vielsalm. And although the Battle of the Bulge would last for another month, its turning point had been reached. The defense of places like Saint-Vith had given the Allied armies what they needed, time to rally and regroup. Next morning, the skies were clear.
Advances down the Manay-Upalis-Bastogne Road and further west toward La Roche. Dead Nazis are passed en route. The remains of...
that would have mired hopelessly the withdrawal of 23,000 men and their thousands of vehicles was frozen hard.
During the early morning hours of the 23rd, both CCB of the 7th Armored and CCB of the 9th Armored were hotly engaged with the enemy. It was difficult.
Largest in the world today, America's tactical 9th Air Force wears down the Wehrmacht all along the Western Front. Thousands of planes at forward airfields support every Allied offensive, smashing Rundstedt's supply lines. The enemy hoped snow would stall these planes, but neither icy winds nor winter weather can check this force of airmen. Day after day, they push the sky attack over the battle lines from the Canadian sector in the north to the French salient in the south. Day after day, a record force takes to the air. Carrying Reich supply lines and slicing Rundstedt's escape routes is their job. Ammunition dumps, trains, armored cars, motor transports. Anything military that moves are their targets.